It's Monday, March 18th, 2013. I'm Kevin McShann, and this is the McShann Sports Beat Report.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Crying, hey, hey, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that same old place, sweet home Chicago. Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Crying, hey, hey, baby, don't you wanna go to that same old place, sweet home Chicago? One and one is two, two and two is four. Look here, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go back to that same old place, sweet home Chicago? And I just can't help myself. I wouldn't mistreat her for no one else. Come on, baby, don't you wanna go to that same old place, sweet home Chicago?
Been looking at your personnel, and obviously questions continue about the status of Brian Urlacher and where you guys are in that process. Can you update us on that?
Really not. I mean, from the press conference, really not. I've had conversation with Brian, and as I said in the press conference, we know his value to our football team, and as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to add information and work together with our personnel people in the process, and Phil in the process of doing what's the best for the Chicago Bears.
Question here in Chicago: should the Chicago Bears re-sign free agent Brian Urlacher? Well, kind of a loaded question, because there are several elements to this story. A, is Brian healthy? Obviously had the knee surgery this past offseason. He's also had the hamstring injury most recently. So the Bears have to determine whether or not Brian Urlacher is actually healthy enough to re-sign going forward. Brian was showing signs of improvement through the course of the season until he got hurt. He was, when he went out with a hamstring, leading the team in tackles and leading the team in solo tackles. Now, you can massage those stats any way you want, but the truth is Brian Urlacher was functioning at a pretty high level before he went out with the hamstring injury. What will Brian Urlacher ask for in terms of a contract negotiation? Obviously, he's not a $10 million a year player any longer, and I believe it's very likely the Bears can get Brian at their price. So, health of Brian Urlacher, and how much will it cost? I think it's, again, very likely that the Chicago Bears as an organization, and Phil Emery as their general manager, would be highly interested in bringing Brian Urlacher back under the right circumstances. He's been the face of this franchise for better than a decade, and if he can play this system, which I think will mirror what we saw from Lovie Smith the last several years, if he can fill that role in the middle the way he has in the past, even at a diminished capacity, I think it'd be wise to bring Brian back. But again, some caveats: health, and what's it going to cost? Nick Roach has filled in nicely at times, but Nick Roach is a free agent. I'm not sure he's your long-term answer there as well. The problem here is the segue is not a smooth one. There is no heir apparent on this roster right now for Brian. So I think in an ideal scenario, Brian proves that he's healthy, Brian comes at the right price, and Brian helps mold the next middle linebacker in future years. Maybe the Bears draft a guy that can take over for Brian a year or 2 years from now. So a very emotional question, and something that probably weighs heavy on those who have followed this team in the career of Brian Urlacher for better than a decade. If you want more Bears conversation, obviously, tune in to Waddle and Sylvie weekdays from 9 to 1 on ESPN Chicago.
Brian Urlacher and the Bears have been in discussions regarding a new deal. What's the likelihood that Urlacher and the Bears are able to work it out, a deal that allows him to finish his career in Chicago?
Well, as long as there's no panic on either side, they can get something done once the market is set. Because if you look at it from Brian Urlacher's stage, there's really not a lot of middle linebacker openings in 4-3 defenses. And sure, he can make the conversion to a 3-4, but also, too, he wants to stay in Chicago. It's working out the right number. I don't think they can go to $6 or $7 million a year. That might be too rich. But if he's willing to go in that $5 million range, $4 million range, then they can work something out. But it's going to go into free agency to see how this is going to go.
Balancing the progression of age, the importance of both brand and human loyalty, and not to mention your ability to still perform as your athletic skills begin to erode and diminish over time, can often be a difficult proposition to undertake, especially when the evaluation is on one of your homegrown products. However, that's precisely the situation at the Chicago Bears, and their all-everything, all-pro middle linebacker Brian Urlacher find themselves in as the team and the veteran continue to determine his future in the Windy City. Chicago Bears general manager Phil Emery is a guarded man of very few words, and when he talks, he really doesn't say a whole heck of a lot. He stayed true to form recently when asked about the future of Urlacher. This is an ongoing process, and will continue to work through that process, Emery said via Larry Mayer of the team's official website. As I said at the Combine, once we work through that, then everyone will know that decision. During his conversation with Mayer, Emery reiterated the importance of keeping the status of Urlacher a private matter until the two parties can reach a mutual agreement. I think that's where it's done best, and I think that's where both parties can talk freely to one another and come to the best conclusion for the player and the team. Emery did concede that with the recent signings of both former Saints left tackle Jermon Bushrod and ex-New York Giants tight end Martellus Bennett, the team is now running up against the cap, which is projected to be set at between $122 or $123 million for this calendar year. The Bears don't have plenty of competition for Urlacher's services now. However, according to ProFootballTalk.com, the Minnesota Vikings have kicked around the tires of adding Urlacher, while the Dallas Cowboys could also benefit from adding the veteran, mainly due to their salary cap troubles. NFL Network's insider Ian Rappaport says that the choice to re-sign Urlacher for the Bears will come down to the economics.
I spoke with Huntfoot, had probably a 30 to 40 minute discussion, and he was great. And we just talked generally about the team, and not specifically about his situation. Just, I asked him about the team and, our locker room, and try to gather as much information I can to do a better job as we move through the spring. I don't think there was any question that he loves Chicago, and this is a place he'd like to be.
Ian, he wants to be there. Brian Urlacher is the heart and soul of the Bears the last 13, 14 years. The question is now, do the Bears want him anymore?
Andrew, it seems that's what Brian Urlacher is waiting for, too, as he decides what to do with his future. He is essentially waiting for the Bears to decide whether or not they want him back. Do they want him to continue to be the face of this defense, to lead this defense? And actually, if he was slotted back in it, despite the new coaches, it would be very similar to what they've done, what they did last year, and really to the last decade, actually. Now, Brian Urlacher has said, and he continues to say, that he would be willing to take a pay cut from a $7.5 million salary he made last year. He wants very badly to remain a member of the Chicago Bears. Now it's in the Bears' court to decide whether or not they want him back, Andrew.
And if they do, Ian, decide to move on, here is what they're going to miss. An 8-time Pro Bowl selection, the Bears' all-time leading tackler. Monsters of the midway, This guy, number one when it comes to tackles, but he did miss 4 games last year due to a hamstring and a knee.
During his illustrious career with the Bears, Urlacher has put together a resume which includes him participating in 182 career games. He has 939 tackles throughout his career. He's assisted on 290. He's put the quarterback on his backside 41 and a half times. And he has 78 passes defended to go along with 22 interceptions and 2 career touchdowns. For this past season, Urlacher took part in 12 games. He tallied 68 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and a single interception. Making sound personnel decisions requires you to set aside emotion, make an informed and educated judgment on the level of a return that you'll be able to get on making the investment into a particular player. That's the quandary that Phil Emery of the Chicago Bears finds himself in. Brian Urlacher is the heart and soul and the native son of Chicago football, continuing a long line of Hall of Fame-bound linebackers, from Urlacher himself to Dick Butkus and Mike Singletary. There's a long lineage of greatness in the middle in the Windy City that has played for one of the most historic franchises in all of professional sports. As for Urlacher himself, there's no doubt that his physical ability has diminished over time due to a history of both knee and hamstring injuries. And now, the face of the franchise in Chicago is left in limbo, knowing that his heart will always beat for the monsters of the Midway. However, also knowing that the impasse will be the level of his physical health and his ability to still provide the Bears with leadership both on and off the field. Urlacher has been nothing but a consistent pro throughout his duration in the league, and while he's scheduled to make just over $7 million for this upcoming year, it was wise for him to announce that he was willing to take a reduced salary in order to still man the middle for the only team he's ever known. Brian Urlacher is one of the good guys, and in his prime was certainly one of the best defenders of his time. So we'll all be watching to see just how the new sheriffs in town continue to handle this ongoing situation. And these negotiations are all a part of the process. But at the end of the day, all football enthusiasts are hopeful that Urlacher can finish what he started in Chicago and cement his legacy in Chicago's historic lore. Everyone in Chicago will be checking their watches of anticipation to see if and when the Bears and Urlacher will reach an amicable resolution. Kevin McShann, Sports Beat, report.